And we return to the Shire. Rich, welcome back. It's been way too long since we talked, and since we've gone last talked to you, your big book came out, man, which you wrote for the Ruins of the North. Congratulations, man. How's it feel to get that book in the mailbox? Get to see the PDF on that.
Really, really surreal. The PDF, I didn't get the same feeling from the PDF. And my girlfriend, my partner, she was saying, she was always asking when the real copies come in. So I think it's still that separation between a PDF not being as real a product as a book. There's something substantial and real about holding a book. So very, very surreal, a bit humbling, really exciting. But yeah, it was really nice to get some messages on the One Ring forum from a couple of the guys on there saying that they'd read a particular adventure that I wrote with Marco, which was what lies beneath. I don't think in the book it's actually spelled out who writes what, is it? It's just on the front page that just said it's written by, and they don't break it down into who wrote what adventure. So mine was the one that I wrote with Marco, was the one called What Lies Beneath. And just to get some really lovely feedback from people, saying how much they enjoyed it, and they really liked the adventure, and actually the book overall, I think it's been really well received. But yeah, really, really strange feeling. Terrifying, really.
So what is the feeling, of seeing this and seeing that other people are going to be running your creation here? And what are you looking for? What kind of interesting stories and things are you wanting to kind of hear trickling down from this?
Well, I mean, from perhaps a theoretical perspective and a practical perspective, I'd like to understand how it ran, actually, because I only play tested it through once with a couple of guys in my gaming group. I did a fairly high level run through where we didn't actually play through the adventure blow by blow. I just ran the highlights and asked them questions, and we just developed the narrative together. I played them through the narrative almost, and we kind of didn't roll for everything. We just focused on certain elements. I play tested certain elements, not from necessarily a mechanical perspective, just from a kind of Q&A perspective, i.e., kind of what would your characters expect to do in this kind of way, to try and understand the various options that needed to be fleshed out for various different gaming groups. So a lot of that was them playing it as they would, but then also trying to think about how other players would play it. So playing it in other ways, applying, I suppose, different personalities to the way of playing it, and really coming up with those different options so that I could write into the adventure a bit more room to maneuver, rather than giving one true way through the adventure, give different options and different approaches. So it would be really interesting for guys like yourself and anybody else to just give us all a bit of feedback actually on how those went, because I think that is the hardest thing when you're writing adventures. It must be for other people. It's actually being able to write an adventure where you naturally have a limited number of words. So you have a maximum word count. There's only so many pages that you can use in the book for your adventure. So you need to balance off covering all the options for those GMs that need that support, but also allowing for an adventure that is maybe adaptable and can be used in different ways. And I think that's the real trick, because the more options you provide, there's a risk, I suppose, of diluting the narrative to the adventure that you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
So mine was, the one that me and Marco wrote was very much a kind of horror ghost story. Nice. Somebody said one of the messages I got that they felt that it was really, really gothic. They really liked it, but they felt that it was a very, very much a gothic feel, a Tolkien and Middle Earth gothic type story. So it was dark, and it had some quite dark themes to it. if the adventure went in one way. I mean, there's we don't want to spoil it, but there's deaths in there, and there's uncomfortable situations in there that some players might not be comfortable with exploring, particularly mums and dads and parents and stuff like that. It could strike chords that perhaps aren't comfortable in their games. So I think I did say on the forums that reader beware. It can be quite dark, and it did get dark in my game. So when I ran it a couple of times, but didn't really want to shy away from that because it was meant to be like that. But if you add too many options in, perhaps that core dynamic gets diluted. So I think it's a balancing act. So it'd be really interesting to hear back from people on how it went in their game, and particularly I'd like to know how it went at a convention. If somebody ran it at a convention, or if somebody ran it with a gaming group, I suspect it would be better run with a group of players that were used to each other, that were familiar with each other, and then people's triggers in scenarios and in RPGs. Naturally know what's kind of off limit to your friends and the people that you play with regularly, don't you? Whereas at a convention, I would suspect that could be a bit more difficult and taxing and challenging. Perhaps it's not a convention game, to be honest, thinking about it now.
But don't you find that writing for that era, that place of Middle-earth with the Dunedain and with the High Elves, people that have suffered so much loss and so much taken away from them, doesn't that kind of naturally lead, you think, to a lot more mature themes and things that are very heavy thematically?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. The Children of Urine, the story of that, there's some pretty dark elements. Really dark elements. Even if it's unknowing, even if the protagonists unknowingly step into some of those areas, it's still really dark stuff. So yeah, I totally agree with you. There's fratricide, there's all kind of stuff in Tolkien. So it is. I do think the story is quite dark, actually. I do think The Lord of the Rings is quite a dark tale. It deals with a lot of fairly dark themes, and also, themes of loss and stuff like that, which are dark. They are sad themes. So I do think it does lend itself to that. And certainly, when we got the kind of brief through from Andrew, who was he's the line manager at Cubicle 7, he was very much, in his brief, it was very much like this is more high powered, this is more dangerous than the Wilderland adventures from Tales from Wilderland. That the power levels ramped up a bit more, the themes are darker. I think his loose brief for us to work to and submit proposals very much allowed for that interpretation. And the guys there can always say no if you provide a pitch to them. They can say no, and that's the way it goes. So, but yeah, I've had some nice feedback. So I think, all in all, I think together as a whole, I think they all work really well as adventures. I'm really impressed with how it all came together, and most of the adventures I've not even seen until the PDF was put forward, was released.
So, what you stepped on this? What was you were given a lot of leeway, just saying, here is what were you told these things should be in the adventures, or cover from this, or how wide open was the field, and what inspired you down the road that you went for Whispers in the Dark?
Okay, so firstly, I've got to be a bit careful. I can't talk about in detail Cubicle 7.
Okay. No, you're right.
But yeah, I think it's fairly standard to say, they get in touch with people that they want to submit proposals for. They give a brief. That brief is very much, it's thematic. They might touch on a few areas that they want people to focus on and include. Obviously, if this was a sister adventure book to the Rivendell book, so it was fairly obvious that the brief was. I don't think I'm breaking any NDA by saying the brief was it should be adventures set in and around Rivendell and Eriador as a whole. So, we had that to work with. It was fairly obvious that, there was going to be Dunedain in it, High Elves in it, that kind of thing. So touching on those kind of elements. And then, like I said earlier, you've got the information about it being darker, more high-powered, or a little more high-powered, set maybe a bit further on in the timeline from the start of Darkening and Mirkwood. So you had enough to work with, but you also had that flexibility to come up with your ideas. So I personally was flabbergasted when they contacted me. To be honest, it was just really because I'd posted a few things on their website and that kind of thing, so they wanted to, see what I could do. And I put forward 3 different pitches of different adventure ideas, and basically Andrew picked one and said, "I really like that one. Go with that one. Yeah, you're on," kind of thing. So I think it follows that kind of normal process then.
Yeah.
Fleshing it out. I'd always wanted to do a ghost story, which What Lies Beneath is basically that. So that was the kind of driver from my perspective. I just think I was lucky that the book, the book Ruins of the North kind of could accommodate that idea. My other ideas weren't ghost stories; they were different things. But yeah, obviously, that fitted in, and that was aligned at that time. So really, that's where the idea came from. It was an idea that I'd previously always wanted to do, and like I say, I've always felt that Middle Earth does lend itself to that. Like we said, these dark elements to Tolkien's work. So kind of fitting that in with the Dunedain and the Lost Realm, and an old family, and this Dunedain's desire to re-establish his family as a force in the north. All these, stemming from an idea to be a force from good. Obviously that became too much, and depending on the course of the adventure, that obviously is one of the downfalls of the NPCs within it, without letting on too much about it. But yeah, that was where it came from. So really, just really built from there. Really, it was quite organic. It's something I wanted to do.
So, what is your toolkit for telling horror in the Tolkien's world? What are the things that Loremasters need to keep in mind in order to tell the Gothic horror, but still make it Middle-earth, make it Tolkien?
I personally focus on. I still think land representing the themes that you're trying to explore, cover that off quite a lot, as well as the characters in there. So, without spoiling it too much, I think the story changes, the land and the terrain, and the feeling changes as you work through the story. So it does become darker, and the character of one of the the protagonists, one of the NPCs of the story, changes as well. That's kind of alluded to and covered off as the scenario develops. So I think really it's focusing through that. So really the toolkit was more themes and feelings that I really wanted to explore, and building up that and making sure that connection between the player characters and the NPCs in there was explored and developed as they travelled from Rivendell to where they needed to get to, and really just building on that, and then the darkness of the growing darkness as they approach their destination, as they approach the goal.
So if you are doing the journeying in there, the encounters should be more about threats and weather and terrain type of things, and not horrible wolves with blood red eyes leaping out at you.
Yeah, those kind of dark elements. I mean, also, I mean, the story, the name, the title, What Lies Beneath. There was, that's kind of alluding to secrets and things maybe appearing not what they appear to be, but also the physical. If you've read the story, and that also alludes to something quite physical in the story as well. So it's really covering off. It's really kind of trying to kind of allude to that as a metaphor within both the kind of narrative, the themes, but also the physical terrain that you're moving through. I mean, I think there's a hazard in there that's quite that's not clear as to what it could be. I think if I'm just remembering, and I might only be remembering the draft copy rather than the actual. But Marco created one where there were some travellers, and it wasn't clear as to what had happened, or it was quite dark, and there was a dark element to it. And I think, like you say, that the hazards kind of enforce the themes and kind of grow the themes, and they get people into that kind of dark mindset. And certainly as the journey carried on, the weather at the end in the kind of penultimate scenes and the last scenes kind of played up to that darkness as well. There was, your classic stormy type elements, even alluding back to things like Wuthering Heights and stuff like that, and Sherlock Holmes' Hound of the Baskervilles. I was kind of thinking of that almost as we were writing those elements, to try and get that feel across. So it's not just about pure horror. It's about that kind of implied horror, and the geography and the terrain changing to kind of force that home.
And how is it like to write horror and to capture that very unique voice, that Francesco set up and Gareth carried on with Tales from Wilderland, of the narrative voice of narrating Tolkien? How was it for you to find that voice and to maintain that voice?
No. I've not really looked back and really analysed that so much. Honestly, it was because we co-wrote it. I think we bounced a lot of ideas off each other, and I think I much preferred co-writing it. I would say definitely as a first job, it kind of shared the pressure. But also going forward, I think I'd rather co-write with people than write on my own. I think as long as you get together with somebody where you kind of aligned on what you want to do, so you're not kind of fighting against each other and you're not pulling in different directions. Me and Marco worked really, really well together, and we bounced ideas off of each other, and we really kind of developed that kind of creeping underlying horror to things. And then Francesco obviously goes through an editing process, and some things changed much for the better when Francesco, sprinkled his magic over it as well. So he added on that kind of language as well and helped that. I mean, Francesco's idea was to add an adventuring party, an errant adventuring party into it, rather than a group of bandits. Probably because he could look at all the adventures and see that bandits were used elsewhere in other adventures. So I just thought that was a great idea. Seeing a failed adventuring party in an adventure, I thought were a stroke of genius, and it gave you that little highlight of could almost be not with it's not meant to be a levity or a kind of comic scene meeting the adventuring party. They are still it is still quite dark, but I think it kind of raised. Kind of in a lot of horrors, you raise the kind of the atmosphere. The atmosphere gets a bit better before the deep plunge afterwards. And I think Francesco cleverly brought that in with the adventuring party, raised that almost like false happiness and lightness to the situation before it got a lot deeper and darker, which was something me and Marco hadn't written in. It's what happened afterwards. So I think Francesco still has a very much a key input, into the process. He's got a very clear vision about how he wants to present, Tolkien through the One Ring for the theme. So I think he brought that to the table as well.
I was thinking, wouldn't it be fun if, as a hazard through a horror adventure, of having the current PCs encountering the ghosts of fallen PCs that they had played?
It would be terrifying. Especially for the GM. We've killed those characters off for a reason.
You're at the pub and the guy offers you a drink. You realize it's your former PC, and then he disappears.
That's evil.
Make a corruption test, please.
Yeah, definitely.
How high is that? I mean, we're talking higher level play. What does that mean to you? Does that mean the higher order mechanics for managing Dunedain and High Elves? Does that mean more corruption tests? When they're saying that this is a book of adventures for higher level, is it just because of increased danger, or what type of things go into that, making this a higher level deal?
I think it's the stakes. I think the stakes can be a lot higher consistently. I mean, I know there's some real high points in Tales from Wilderland. I mean, you fight a dragon at the end of that one.
Yeah,
can't get much higher than that, really. But I think what you can look at from a power level is that the overall stakes. So Tales from Wilderland has a lot of high points where the stakes are very, very high. But I think if you drew a line across the mean in the stakes, it would perhaps be a bit lower than what's in Ruins of the North. I think that the threat level is at a higher bar, and it's constant. It's almost unrelenting from reading what I've written, what I've read of the adventures in there. So certainly there's the actual physical stakes. I think also if you're dealing with characters that are more developed, then arguably they're going to have at least temporary shadow points, if not some permanent shadow points. So the more their exposure and risk to that is a lot more significant. And even though they've perhaps got higher valor and wisdom to deal with those things, I think just having that there and preying on those negative shadow traits that players' characters might have really rams that home, makes it a lot more personal. You've got, I mean, some of the stuff in the Rivendell books are terrifying from a starting character perspective. I mean, some of the stuff, and particularly some of the undead.
Mm-hmm.
No real way of dealing with those adversaries. If you're a starting character, you've got no way of, when I say interacting, I mean hitting. You've got no way of actually, dealing with some of those undead characters if you've not got, certain rewards, certain virtues from your character cultures in the same way that you would have if you were playing a Dunedain character, or you were using the rules for treasure and the rules for artifacts and wondrous artifacts and items that you get in the Rivendell book. So just from a mechanical perspective and the way that the mechanics and the adversaries interact with actual characters, those kind of starting characters from the main rulebook just don't have those kind of options available to them. So the threat level's massive if you're walking into certain adventures without those abilities and such. So they're very, very dangerous from that perspective.
You were telling me you have a gaming group of friends from a long time. Have you worked that stuff in? How long have they been gaming? Wondering if so before you introduced that material.
So I mean, I've not, apart from playtesting it, I've not run any of Rivendell or Ruins of the North with them at all. We're still playing Darkening and Mirkwood. I mean,
yeah, that'll take a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And you want to take your time with that stuff because it's brilliant. It's up there with the Great Pendragon campaign, in my opinion.
Definitely.
A really fantastic campaign. Obviously needs a bit of tweaking, a bit of work from Loremasters, but really don't want to rush that. So we do take our time a lot, and we had quite a break last year as well for personal circumstances, people moving houses, things like that. So we've only really got back online in the new year. So really, I'm quite far behind where perhaps a lot of gaming groups, yourself and others, are perhaps in the Darkening. We've only really just started it.
I'm trying to wrap up my Octung Cthulhu Indiana Jones thing before we transition into there. So we're trying to figure out how to stop and where to end this campaign so that we can start the Darkening of Mirkwood.
Yeah, right. Okay, so you're even further behind me then.
Yeah.
So I think it's difficult to say, but from a gaming perspective, I've gamed with the guys that are, particularly one of the players. I've gamed with him since I was 12, so for about 30 years now. So you kind of know your players. We're all around about the same age. We all know we want the same things out of games. So I think it's kind of safe to explore those things in our games. So I'll have no doubts that I will run Ruins eventually. and we're probably in the 60s rather than as 40s, but there you go. It'll keep us plugging away for a while. But yeah, the same kind of themes you find in Darkening. I mean, it's a very, very bittersweet story, isn't it? You know, the campaign, if it follows, if your gaming group follows the way that the campaign works, it's fantastic. You just want to run that bit at the end where, you know, the standoff against you know who.
Yeah.
One of the you know who, and how they deal with, you know, Dol Guldur and the what happens to the woodmen. I think it's a fantastic way that they've taken an area that's unexplored, but that, you know, Gareth and Francesco still gave it that real strong Tolkien feel. So it's fairly easy to. It's such a strong theme, and it's such a well written set of books. I think you can almost copy how they did it, in those books, and just, I'm not saying copy the writing. Well, yeah, perhaps I'm saying, you know the writing style, so you can kind of work to that, and you can work to the themes of that and how it's structured. You know, the adventures are structured in a certain way. So I do think those are quite easy to follow and be inspired by, and work with him, because they're so well done, and, you know, they're so kind of easy to get that feeling from.
How did you begin? I mean, it has so much material and there's so much to go, and it leaves it so open for the lore master. How did you choose to begin session 1?
What, of my personal campaign?
Yeah, of your Darkening of Mirkwood.
Okay, so this was before Darkening of Mirkwood. I think I started running it. I always wait with a role playing game. I always wait till there's a bit of material out for it. So I didn't start running it until Tales from Wilderland had come out, and looked at that. And I know that we take our time, so I knew that things like Darkening of Mirkwood were going to be published and that kind of thing, or I had an idea that they were. So I knew that by the time that came out, we would really be running out of source material and published material, because we are quite slow. You know, we do take our time and stuff, and, you know, we know my gaming sessions are only a couple of hours on a Friday night, so we know we're not going to churn through a lot of the material in a short space of time. So really, it was just, I like kind of including the characters in it. So I think the game's flexible enough, so I have characters with a higher standing than what maybe pre-gens would have. So really, I'm quite loose with just finding out what the players want to play, and one of the characters was a barding. He wanted to be almost like an emissary for King Bard. So I started it. You know, I was quite happy with him starting off at that. Gave him an artificially high standing that he'd not paid for. So I think he started at about a standing of 3. So he'd already, I kind of broke the rules for standard character generation. But I think if players come up with that, I think they give you the ideas for the game. So it was quite easy to involve them in that. I really liked the story of the Marsh Bell, but I felt that the idea of, you know, Balin travelling to the Eagles was kind of something that I quite like to involve the player characters on. So I changed that around a lot, and from you know, the Marsh Bell introductory scenario, I developed that kind of adventure that I kind of fan wrote and shared, where they travelled, you know, from Dale and Esgaroth all the way across Mirkwood to the Eagles in the west. So that really took us ages. It's fortunate, because by the time I'd worked through all that, I'd been able to read Tales from Wilderland fully, shape the elements, and alter the elements slightly to fit in with my campaign. By then as well, there were already a lot of discussions online about what other playing groups were using. So it's quite easy to tweak other people's ideas, even if you don't lift them wholesale. And knowing my players, you know, like I said, I've gamed with them ages. I don't want to say they're boring, but they are quite predictable, because I know how they think.
Mm-hmm.
It's always helpful. Yeah, I'm not saying you lead line stuff, but I do actually know how my players think, so it's quite easy to predict what they do and what they want out of a game. Also get them to write wish lists as well, of the way that they see the character developing, but also what they kind of want the game to be about. And from that, you can kind of structure, you know, various scenarios. You can include things it's very easy to do that if you've got players that are quite upfront and quite straight with what they actually want out of a game. Do they want a lot of combat? Do they want, more investigations? Do they want more social kind of settings? Do they want quite a personalised, localised plot line, or do they want like far-reaching, massive events that cover the whole of Wilderland and that kind of thing? So that's how I kind of developed my campaign. So lots of stealing other people's ideas, running it slow and finding out what my players want and fitting all that together, really. So I've been fortunate that we started perhaps later in the release schedule, and we also take our time. So really, there's that much material. I think, trying to think now. I think my campaign's currently only on 2948 or 2949. So it's not even Tales from Wilderland.
Hey, it's Token. It's all about the journey.
It is, yeah. And my players, they like to take the time. They do like to take the time. They like to explore things. We do often go off at a bit of a tangent discussing, certain parts of the lore and the ideas that Tolkien had, especially for one of the players who's never read the books. He's loves the world, but he just couldn't get through the books.
Yeah.
So I've heard that quite a lot. You either love the books or you just can't engage with them, can you? So we talk about that quite a lot. He's a bit of a Loremaster as well, so it's quite strange. He doesn't know the books, but his character's a scholar. He's a bit of an emissary. He's got old lore and rhymes of lore. So a lot of it is kind of bringing him into the game through that, which is quite nice actually, because he doesn't start from as a player. He doesn't start from a lot of knowledge.
There's no meta going on. It's all very pure.
Exactly. Yeah. So what I have this book of lore that he's got, and I just put props into it and stuff. I age a load of scroll work and stuff and hand it to him and all that kind of thing. Sometimes I'll kind of write it in runes and stuff and whatnot. I don't make him translate it. I pass him a translation. It's just as props and stuff. So it's kind of nice that, because like you say, as a player, him as a player's learning it as his character learns it, and he really brings a kind of fresh perspective to it. So he's a lot of the time he's ahead of the game. The other players are like, oh no, that can't be happening, but he'll get it banged on the nose. He's a clever player, so it's quite nice to see that him grow into it as his character does, which I kind of like, and it takes a bit of the pressure off me as well.
How about the other players in there? How do they handle having too much knowledge from reading it, going, oh, we're going into this area and has this going on, or this happened in Lord of the Rings in this area? How do they handle that, and how do you handle them knowing things?
I wouldn't say that they know things offhand. They're not encyclopedic in the knowledge. The rest of them have read the books, but I wouldn't say they're any. They've got that level of knowledge and understanding like a hell of a lot of the guys on the forums have. So I'd say I'm in a fortunate position where out of the whole of the five of us, I perhaps know the most out of us all. Which I always think is useful as a GM. I think whatever kind of game or genre you run, I think it's always helpful for the GM to be the most informed, because then you've got that, I don't know, point of authority, point of understanding. You can easily access that knowledge because it's immediate. It's in your head. So I always think it's fun to bring the players along with you rather than players having that knowledge. But they've always been great. They really are a good set of players. They'll make decisions based on the character rather than as a player. So sometimes as a player, they will know that picking a certain route or making a certain decision within the game is not conducive to a healthy character. But they'll make that decision anyway because it's what the character would do. They wouldn't be aware of certain things that the players are aware of. They wouldn't have made those connections that the players made. So they're very good at playing to that. They're really, really good at making decisions based on the character. And also, if things are 50-50 for a character decision, they'll then kind of metagame it and pick the decision that's best for the game. So for getting the game going, so they're absolutely fantastic, regarding that. My players certainly make the campaign flow and are a lot easy to accommodate, and really fantastic regarding that. They make my life a lot easier.
You mentioned the lore book that you'd put together for your lore master in there. What other props and items do you use to bring your campaign to life?
I got some beautiful maps from the Etsy website. I forgot the name of the girl that does them, but she's created some absolutely gorgeous maps. So I think maps are a great prop for the One Ring. It's all about the journey. When we first picked up Lord of the Rings, I'm sure one of the main things I remember from when I initially picked up the book with the map it's the map in the Hobbit. And before you even start reading the book, you might be on your way home. I remember getting it from W.H. Smith's, which was a bookshop in England, and I remember poring over the map of the Hobbit before I'd even read any of the chapters, and just thinking, God, what's all this about? Look at all this dragon there, that kind of thing, and it just sparks the imagination. So I think a lot of the fun for things like props is that they take you back to that initial feeling that you first had when you get any kind of fantasy novel. I mean, it's almost a stereotype, isn't it? A fantasy novels that they've got to have a map. They've got the map of the land and that kind of thing in it. So it is kind of that nostalgia of these maps. So I try and these maps that this girl produces are really good. They're almost in-game props as well because they're aged and weathered. She's written them out and she's sewn them onto fabric. So you've got a really crunchy, lived-in kind of feel. You can almost see them, rolled up and tied with a leather strap and used by a dwarf or by an adventuring party to just refer to, and that kind of thing. So they're really nice.
If you could email me her information, I'd love to put that in the show notes so that people could, if they want to get, invest in this kind of prop, then they can definitely get this.
Absolutely. I mean, I should have brought. I've got them over there, but I'm just looking over at them now. But I'm not sure how well they'd appear on camera. But I can grab them and show them here.
Yeah, let's go. Let's see.
Just excuse me. So I'll show you a couple of things. I don't know if they're going to fit all on the camera, but that's the map.
Wow.
So it's all very crunchy. You can hear it. It's like crunchy. So she's mapped it on fabric, but it's these kind of things. It's just it's only a map of Middle Earth, and then there's one of Wilderland that she's doing for me. But really, they really feel old and unique, and they're not printouts from a book. And then there's a guy that's also, I'll send you his information, but he's done kind of props of scroll work and stuff. So you got things written out. There's the Ring of Barra here, there. They're just aged books of lore and such. So I kind of use a lot of that. I kind of scrounge and scrimp and have a look at stuff. If there's nothing available from someone else, I'll do a similar thing of my own. Write out poems. Get Tolkien's poems and stuff from the books. Well, for instance, recently there was the Laird Luthien came up in one of the adventures that I were running. So I did a print out. I aged it. I got burnt the corners. Smeared an old tea bag over it, and it gives the page that discoloration and stuff. So, and then just plonk them in this kind of wallet for the player. So they've got that as a kind of prop. So yeah, it's all kind of stuff like that, just to bring something tactile to the game.
Very cool. And let's wrap up with your advice for handling going into running adventures in Eriador, the Ruins of the North things. What do the Loremasters need to keep in mind before tackling this, or in their homework to run this?
Well, personally, after reading it all, I think you certainly need to have the right mix of players in there. I think read Ruins of the North and understand the threats in there, because some of the threats can only be faced by quite specific cultures. I do think I would love to see somebody run Ruins of the North without a Dunedain or a High Elf.
So that'll be a short campaign?
Yeah, I'm not sure it would be particularly possible. I think it, obviously a lot of the adventures in there are designed to have the Dunedain in it or High Elves in it, because a lot of the motivation and a lot of the input stems from working with, Elrond, or in the service of Aragorn, or Gandalf and that kind of thing. So you've got that power level, certainly. But my feeling is you need to prep the adventures more, read the adventures more, and understand what's at stake within those, the power levels within those, and make sure you've got the appropriate characters. Or if you haven't got those characters in there, depending on how you run a game, have escape routes or other options for dealing with those kind of threats. They're alluded to in a lot of the adventures, how you can face something, but make sure you understand that as a GM and you're prepped for that. Or if you go the other way, I mean, a lot of GMs work with, you just throw an opponent or a threat in front of a group of players, and it's up to them to decide whether they engage with it or not, and woe betide them if they pick a fight or get themselves into a situation that they can't extricate themselves from. I'm a bit more of be a bit fairer, give them an option, that kind of thing. I've kind of bent to that rather than the more hardline view. But yeah, certainly preparation. I think the adventures are a bit higher stakes. They're a bit more involved. I think there's more mechanics in there as well, just from purely, the Rivendell book. It introduces the subsystems for treasure and the Eye of Mordor.
Yeah.
So you need to understand those as well, because if you get a situation where a revelation event occurs at the same time as a high point or a dramatic point in one of the adventures, you really could really put the party in jeopardy, put your player character in jeopardy, more so than perhaps in older adventures where the Eye of Mordor rules don't come into play. So it's certainly the key thing would be preparation and understanding the characters that you've got in your gaming group and how they are going to interact with the challenges within the adventures.
And that reminds me, we were talking before we came on live, talking about how at the convention game I ran, One Ring for about 7 players that showed up for a 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. game, and I tried to use the Eye of Mordor thing, and I think I broke it because I don't think that was designed for 7 players. That was a lot of tolerance, and I think we almost made it still at some points with so many eyes rolled, but yeah, that was not designed for 7-player fellowship.
There's a really good discussion actually on the One Ring forums about the Eye of Mordor rules and how they work with larger groups. And I know a couple of the guys, one of them proposed an individual eye awareness that goes up, which I quite like. So although the party, when a revelation event occurs, the party share the revelation. The individual eye awarenesses are the ones that trigger it. So I quite like that rule. It's quite an interesting one. So it's another option. That's the beauty of the tour rule system. You've got these subsystems that if you understand how they interact with other elements of the game, you can tweak them to your own preferred style of play. I think it's a really nice to you can fiddle with those and use them in different ways. So it really lends itself to that kind of tweaking and changing slightly for your own play preferences and that. But yeah, that's exactly kind of what the kind of concerns were regarding Eye of Mordor, because the more players you have, the more eyes you roll.
Oh, even with that large group, that some players would just drop the dice and it would be an eye every single time.
It's quite taxing, isn't it, and quite challenging as a Loremaster to come up with what that actually means every time someone rolls one, doesn't it?
I found it going at 1 a.m. You can. It's really easy to come up with the hat stuff for the eye.
That depends how evil you are, Gary.
No, I just let the players put stuff in front of them and let them start slipping and sliding and being goofy in there at 1 a.m. Oh no, the worst one I did was they rolled one where they were in the combat with the bandits and things at the end of the Theft of the Moon, and then they rolled an eye, and then we were getting really high, and I realized I kind of missed a couple of adjusting the eye thing, and so I said, okay, a pack of orcs comes swarming in and add to the combat. That was the most evil I think I was at the end, because they had done it very stealthily and were about to break the module an hour early. So it's like, good, here comes some more orcs. Have fun.
Yeah, definitely. From a convention perspective, that's absolutely, you've got to do that. You can't finish early. People pay good money to play in your games.
They stayed up too late. They needed orcs. Well, thank you very much, Rich, for joining us, and thank you so much for the work with Ruins of North. And I cannot wait to sink my teeth into reading that, and I can't wait to get started on my Darkening of Mirkwood campaign either.
No, yeah, it's get those other campaigns finished.
Excellent.
Cheers.
Yeah.